Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. Sorry, I
What are
have
you?
the YouTube video in the background, and I just started hearing my own voice. Closing that, resetting. Today, we're talking about Dayne St. Clair, Inter Miami's brand new brand new goalkeeper. We're talking about Luis Suárez, Inter Miami's returning
Brand new
striker.
goalkeeper. It's the upside down world. Scotty, take a seat. I'll take on, okay? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Saur. Today, we're going to be talking about a few new signings that Inter Miami has announced, starting with the goalkeeper, going on to the returning Luis Suárez. We're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about how Inter Miami going to play next season. There's a lot to discuss. Apologies for my friend Scotty's a little bit of hazy brain because it looks like he can't keep up with all that Inter Miami is doing in the off season. But first, Scotty, are you good?
That did throw me off. It absolutely threw me off, but
You
I'm
know
ready.
what threw me off? You started at a cadence that was here, and I was expecting it to be here. So I just suddenly felt all the energy drain out from my body, and I was like, oh, what is this? But we're back on track. We're back on track.
I will say, I've been excited to do this episode for the last 24 hours because when Inter Miami signs a player that I think is going to be defining for the club moving forward, like I want to just get on and talk about it right away.
Yeah.
And of course, we had recorded 5 days in a row, and some of that you guys will see in the near future. But it wasn't right to do it yesterday. But I have been excited and anticipating this conversation for the last 24 hours, and that's how we're going to start it by fumbling over our own words. I don't really want to go to pleasantries. I just want to get into it. Are you ready?
I am ready, and I think it's only fitting because Inter Miami seems to be just stumbling through, or actually stumbling in a nice, organized manner through the off season as well. So I think it's just fitting. Take us away.
Okay, let's start with this. 2 days ago, Jorge Mas, owner of Inter Miami, co-owner with David Beckham and his brother Jose Mas, tweeted this out on Twitter. So this is quoting his Twitter account. Post-championship reflection, what an epic run to become MLS Cup champions. Our last 9 games was an example of the excellence we expect. 33 goals and a 25 plus 25 goal differential, and in moments the best football we've ever played. Totally what you'd expect from
Not an
owner
understatement.
of a championship team. Here, I think, is the part that I hope Inter Miami fans can get excited about. But the best version of your Inter Miami is yet to come. We cannot and will not stay static. We promise our fans and La Familia that we will reload in 26 as our primary goal is to win the CONCACAF Champions and qualify for the FIFA Club World Cup. Stay tuned as the bar is reset to a higher level. Forward and let's go. Adelante y vamos. Could an owner say something that would get you more fired up?
I don't think so. I think we criticize owners a lot. We tend to talk poorly about them when things don't go our way. But there are 2 things that I judge an owner by. If they have ambitions, are they just full of words and not backing it up with their actions? If that's the case, the criticism is worth it. And second, how publicly available and accessible they are. In this case, Jorge Mas, for whatever you want to say about them, bringing in the money into Miami, have backed their words with actions. Their choices may not have always hit. It can sometimes be a hit and a miss with signings, with coaches, all of that. But they're doing everything that they possibly can to A, invest money into Miami, B, bring in huge talent and bring in opportunities for the youth, but also superstars to the league, superstars to Inter Miami, and be there communicative with their audience, with the fans. And that, I think, is a great sign of a relationship between the front office and the fans. I know we get frustrated about when we don't get to hear about injuries and there's not transparency and certain things. But when it comes to this, it's, I think, a really heartwarming thing to see a an owner just not just revel in the glory of what's happened, but also think about the future. 2 weeks after we've just won our first MLS Cup championship, they're already thinking about what they want to do next, how they want to improve, how they want to better the team, what levels we want to go at, what our targets and aims should be. So they're not sitting on their laurels. They want to improve, and they know what the club means to the Inter Miami fans. And more importantly, I think they recognize that this is a special moment that this club will never have again. Once Lionel Messi leaves, it's never going to be the same. So they want to maximize on that as well. And it's really nice to see the owners aligned with what the fans expect. And I think that's a great place to be as a fan. I've supported teams in the past whose owners are terrible, to say the least. And this is a refreshing change of pace. And I'm glad that Jorge Mas made those statements. Now, I'm sure they're going to back it up, and looks like they have with the signings we're going to talk about. But a lot more to come, but a great starting point of where we want to go next season as well.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole podcast on Jorge Mas and Inter Miami's ownership and like where they rank in terms of North American professional sports team ownership, because I do think they're going to get like really well regarded in that conversation. But it's not really where we're going today. So we're just going to move forward, except to say that it's easy to talk. It's easy to say things. It is another thing to back it up, and that's where we're going to go next. Before we do, Kareem gives a super chat, and thank you for that. He says, "Screw it, Beckham. Bring me Van Dijk." Let's talk about Van Dijk a little bit later in the show. Inter Miami signed the best goalkeeper in the MLS yesterday. So 2 days ago, Jorge Mas tweets out, "We're going to get even better." And now we're signing the best goalkeeper in the MLS. Dayne St. Clair played with Minnesota United for the last 6 or 7 years. Was a super draft pick, was at the University of Maryland in college, and has blossomed into one of the best shot-stopping goalkeepers in the MLS. I mean, what a time to be an Inter Miami fan. We will talk, we'll go more into the details, but just initially, this is our goalkeeper. Period. End of discussion. We had conversations about Rocco. We had conversations about Ustari. We had conversations about guys down in Argentina like Guido Herrera. All of that's gone now. It's not Drake Callender. It's not Oscar Ustari. It's not Rocco. It's not Guido. This is the guy. You're bringing him in to be your new number one goalkeeper. And so for Inter Miami, a team that has definitely been in flux at the goalkeeping position for the last 12 months, how's it feel to have a guy?
I think you said it brilliantly at the end. Inter Miami has been a club that's been in flux when it comes to its goalkeeping situation, and a lot of the chaos is their own doing. We led this situation to what it is today. I think last season there was a lot of uncertainty about the goalkeeping. We had doubts whether Starry is going to be the number one, Drake Callender going to be the number one. Of course, the management knew what they wanted to do. Looks like they didn't get their first choice goalkeeper come in to replace Drake Callender. They panicked at the end, brought in Oscar Starry. Then Rocco Rios Novo comes in. And then the entire season, there's a bit of a conversation about who's our number one, because honestly, nobody was outright the chosen one that you wanted in your goal. And it was always a conversation about who's the better of the two. But it wasn't the conversation about this is the best goalkeeper that we have at the club. To go from that level of chaos and uncertainty about your number one goalkeeper to now signing a goalkeeper who I believe is 28 years old, has just won the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, is going to be here for as long as you want him to be here. There's hands down no doubt in my mind that he's going to be starting in all the big games. He will be here to command that back line. This is not just a quality signing, but it's a statement signing. This is telling the league, you saw what we did last season. Now watch what we do next season. And this is a brilliant way to start off our signing spree, or what I expect to be a signing spree, by saying, okay, we saw that we weren't good enough at goalkeeping last year. We identified the mistake, and we're not just going to fill the gap. We're going to put glitter and stardust all over it and present you with the best possible piece that we can have in that position. And that's St. Clair. And I think this came out of left field. Nobody expected it. But my goodness, this could be the biggest impact signing of Inter Miami's 2026 season. You've sorted your goalkeeping position for the foreseeable future.
You and I had a conversation over the last couple of weeks about Rocco Rios-Novo and whether they should bring him back. And I think we both kind of were like, yeah, just go with Rocco because he's going to be inexpensive. He is going to be a guy that's already proven he can win an MLS Cup, and he's good enough for what you're trying to do at Inter Miami. And we were looking at some of the names that they were attached to, and like they did not seem like obvious upgrades. Maybe they were slightly better at this and slightly worse at that, but they were kind of just felt like lateral moves for the sake of making a sort of name signing at the goalkeeping position, but they were going to be much more expensive, and they weren't really going to be obvious upgrades, or at least not across the board obvious upgrades. With Dayne St. Clair, I think this is easily like a huge upgrade at goalkeeper. And so that's the difference between when we were talking about Rocco versus Guido Herrera, who I really don't think would be a much better goalkeeper than Rocco. I think Dayne St. Clair is. You don't have to pay a transfer fee for him. He's coming as a free agent. Now, he's going to make a lot of money, but he's not going to be a DP or anything like that. He'll be a TAM signing. He'll also be cheaper because you won't have to use an international roster slot on him. So you don't have to go out and spend $250,000 worth of GAM in order to bring in an international roster slot for him. And he's proven it in this league as an elite shot stopper. This season, he was in the 93rd percentile of goalkeepers in terms of his ability to stop shots. He is, like, if you're thinking about him as what type of player he is, he's like a Drake Callender in his ability to make the great saves, except he's much more consistent. And, like, that's like a really fantastic goalkeeper. If you can get, again, this is the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year. His peers have voted that of him. The team, Minnesota United, is a low block, really rely on their defense and their goalkeeper type of team, and they rode that and Dayne St. Clair's performances all the way to the playoffs, all the way to the Western Conference semifinals. Like, everyone around him looks at him and says, this is a guy I want to build around. This is a star. This is a stud. This is an excellent goalkeeper. And not just within his organization, but within the entire league and everyone that's seeing him play firsthand. He's in the prime of his career. And says St. Clair's Canadian, so he will use an international roster slot. He won't because he has his green card, and he's been in the U.S. for a decade now. So even though he's not an American, he won't take an international roster slot. Like, I think this is an absolute slam dunk, home run type of signing. We'll talk about the one question mark, but ultimately, like, the profile of goalkeeper, I think, is perfect.
It's so interesting because I spoke about Rocco and how Inter Miami should go back for him and bring him back whatever happens, because you won't get the kind of upside with another goalkeeper that you do with Rocco, especially the ones that we were being linked to. So Guido Herrera, Oscar Stari already here, and the names that we were hearing in the goalkeeping position, none of them filled me with any joy or excitement, because it felt like Rocco was bringing a higher upside and was well embedded into the team. This signing with St. Clair not just has all the upsides of Rocco, but is I would say, 1 or 2 degree leap in talent. I know there's some question marks about his ability to play from the field. We can talk about that. But just, I think, in terms of shot-stopping talent, who he is as a goalkeeper of the year in the MLS in 2025, the season that Inter Miami won the MLS Cup, he was the goalkeeper of the year, voted by his peers. This is the best signing that you could possibly make in terms of statement of how you want to approach the squad building next season. You're not paying a transfer fee, no international roster slot. Yes, the salary fee might be high, but I think to bring in a goalkeeper of this value or this talent, you have to pay that much anyways. And this again is a signing that can be here for the future. This is a signing that is not one where you have to where you ask questions. Is he going to evolve into a good player? This is a well-set player in the MLS. He's a veteran for all intents and purposes, even though he might just be in his 20s. It's brilliant strategizing, and I think this is maximizing the most of this goalkeeping position. I don't think they could have done any better without losing out on some other positives. Overall, holistically, I am very happy with this signing, and I think he's going to fit right into this Inter Miami team. I've seen some of his tapes from last year. I watched a couple of highlight videos that the MLS put out when he won the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, and it's his shot stopping, man. It's supreme.
I just want to clear something up that's going on in the chat. If you're Canadian on an American team, you absolutely have to fill an international roster slot. I know that may sound silly because there's Canadian teams in the MLS, but if you are Canadian on an American team, you have to have an international roster slot unless you have a green card to work in the U.S., in which case you don't. And that's true of any player, which is what Dayne St. Clair has. He did not count against a foreign international roster slot for Minnesota for the last few years. Again, he went to college in the United States. He's been with Minnesota for the last 7 years. He's got everything he needs from that perspective. So, yes, Canadian players need that. Kamal Miller needed it back when he was on Inter Miami, but Dayne St. Clair doesn't because he has that green card, just like plenty of Inter Miami players have gotten over the last couple of years. Robert Taylor, Leo Campana, not Americans, but they were able to get that green card, and then they no longer required an international roster slot. Dayne St. Clair is in that situation. Okay, I don't think we've done it justice. He is going to be an elite shot stopper. He really is. Like, I think Inter Miami fans are going to watch him next year and think, oh my God, how have we never had this before? Because he's going to be fantastic at it. His season this year was his best season, but he's gotten multiple like elite top of the MLS type shot stopping seasons over the last 5 years. Like, he is consistently excellent. And again, Minnesota built their team around keeping the ball out of the back of the net. Last season, they gave up the second fewest number of goals. I think they gave up one more than Philadelphia, but they're 39 goals on the season, 38 goals on the season. And a lot of that was because of Dayne St. Clair and his shot-stopping ability. I think he was credited with about 10 goals, extra goals saved based on the chances given up. And when you compare that to like an Oscar Stadi who gave up, I think he was on pace if he had played 34 games to give up like 7.5 extra goals. You're talking about a 17, 18 goal swing in goalkeeping performance over the course of a 34 MLS game season. Like, that's almost a goal. That's a goal every other game, really, in goal differential. I can't overstate how big of a difference this will be if Dayne St. Clair comes to Inter Miami and continues to play like he has for Minnesota.
Elite is the right word. I think that's the word that you've nailed. We haven't expected our goalkeeper to perform well because we haven't had that level of goalkeeper for the last 2 years. Drake Callender was injured for large parts of the second half of the 2024 season, I believe. Last season, I think we were constantly in this flux of Ustari's performing well in some games, then he just lets in these flood of goals. Then Rocco comes in. Rocco was really good. Rocco was an above average, very good performing goalkeeper for Inter Miami. But this is a different level. This is the elite level of the MLS. And I don't know what kind of a player that you would compare him to. I don't want to say a Lucho Costa of a goalkeeper you're signing, but it's similar, right? You're signing the elite of the elite, the creme de la creme of the MLS itself. So it's like saying if you bring in someone like Evander from Cincinnati, who's one of the best in his position, you're bringing in St. Clair, who's one of the best in his position. So yes, comparing apples to oranges, but I think that juxtaposition somewhere fits in this instance.
I don't want to be hyperbolic, but if
No,
Dayne St.
absolutely.
Clair performs like he did this year, next season for Inter Miami, like, there's a chance that gap in difference could be similar to what you're losing from Jordi Alba or Sergio Reguilon. Like
Maybe.
it could be that big of a jump at the goalkeeping position.
But we don't want to be hyperbolic.
But I don't want to be hyperbolic. Okay, so you look through some of the numbers. The shot stopping numbers are like elite. The work with his feet, not quite. It's not that impressive, and that's why I wanted to bring up Drake Callender earlier. Like I think you should expect the ball playing ability of an American college goalkeeper or Canadian college goalkeeper. Not going to be particularly impressive with his feet, but again, I will just say I think ball playing goalkeepers are the most overrated trait any soccer player could have in the modern game. And if you're talking to me about trying to win the Premier League or trying to win the UEFA Champions League, fine. Like I get the value in it. I see what you're talking about on paper, but when you go down even one or two levels, it is so unbelievably overrated. And so I think chasing that is such a fool's errand, and you lose a lot of your ability to find value for money when you go chasing that type of trait. And by saying, okay, we can live without that, you can actually get an incredible goalkeeper for like a pretty reasonable price. And when you're talking about a salary cap league, you're talking about real value for money there.
And Inter Miami doesn't play out the back. They do not. Whatever you want to say, Inter Miami does not play out from the back with a goalkeeper. If Inter Miami was playing out from the back with a goalkeeper, they would be pushing their high line up. They would be playing with their centre backs higher up.
Let's just be clear before someone calls us out. They don't play out from the back in the way that the elite out of the back goalkeepers do, like you used to see from Ederson at Man City or Andre Onana at Inter
You
Milan.
only need a PSG or a Man City to see what a playing out from the back goalkeeper looks like. And that's not what this Inter Miami team is. We have often been reliant on Sergio Busquets to drive the ball forward. When Sergio Busquets is not driving the ball forward, Inter Miami is not building up the same way. Regardless, I completely agree with you that it's the most overrated trope in modern football that you need a goalkeeper who is elite with his feet. Yes, it's an added advantage if you play a certain play style, if you play at the most elite level. If you play for a team that's been coached in the Barcelona style, that has the Pep Guardiola influence on it, yes, you may. But I think at the MLS level especially, that's a secondary calling. You need your goalkeeper to stop goals first and foremost. For a team like Inter Miami that concedes so many opportunities, that has its goal threatened as often as we do, you need an elite goalkeeper to stop the goals first and then build out from the back. And you can solve that building out from the back in other ways as well. So I agree with you. This may not be ideal in terms of St. Clair being a great player with his feet, but he's a goalkeeper, and for me, my goalkeeper needs to stop shots first, and then the rest can come with it.
What I will say is the one weakness I think is real is I don't think he's phenomenally commanding in the box when balls get put in. So something to keep in mind. That is a trait you would kind of hope for in a big, strong goalkeeper. But as far as like the coming out for the ball, his numbers in 2025 were not particularly impressive in terms of like sweeping up. But that's because Minnesota played in a low block and there was very few opportunities for that. If you go back over the last couple of years, he's shown that he can do that pretty well. If even in 2024, he was like one of the best in the MLS at sweeping. So he is a like classic athletic type goalkeeper. That's excellent shot stopper. And so I really don't know. I really don't think you could ask for anything better in a player right now than Dayne St. Clair. And again, he's coming off an MLS Goalkeeper of the Year type season. He is 28. He turns 29 in the middle of next season. So he's like prime age. And this could be your goalkeeper for well, I want to get to that in a second. But I do think Inter Miami looked at options down in Argentina, and we were kind of nervous about them because we looked into them and we didn't think they were big upgrades. Like, I do think this guy's a big upgrade. And then when you talk about won't require a transfer fee, when you're talking about won't require an international roster slot, you're talking about saving $750,000 dollars in the cap, like that could be a whole extra quality player on this team that you're keeping or that you're going to be able to get by going with this player as opposed to some of the other names that we heard.
And what does this say about Inter Miami's transfer strategy, right? I think for me, this is very heartening. The fact that Inter Miami has looked at other players abroad, looked at the MLS as well, and then managed to land the biggest fish in the water and have gone with the MLS option goes to show that there's some analysis happening behind the scenes, because this is a player that's not familiar to Javi Mascherano, the coaching staff. He's not of the Spanish ilk. He's not from Argentina. So there's no obvious connection other than Inter Miami saying this makes the most obvious sense in terms of talent and value for money. And I'm glad that we are making such signings, because it goes to show that it's not just about who the coach wants and who they think is available from within their networks. This is about proper scouting and actually finding out which players, even from within the MLS, are available for the most value for money. And this is a brilliant sign from what's to come, I think. Similar to what we saw with Fafa Pico as well.
No, better, way better than Fafa Pico.
In terms of course. But
no, like I don't even want to throw that name out there. I think this is so much more fundamentally impressive than that. So I don't even want to use that as a comparison. Like this is a best in the league type player at his position. This is, Fafa Pico is like one of the better free agents, but this is like you're getting the best guy in the league at this position. Not to disrespect Fafa Pico, but I just like this is something else entirely. I was thinking about this because it feels like so much of what Inter Miami has done since Messi arrived has either been players that are going to be cultural fits at Inter Miami and around Lionel Messi, or they have sort of direct connection to the coaches that are at Inter Miami at the time, whether it's Tata Martino with a guy like Julian Gressel, or obviously Javier Mascherano brought in a lot of the guys that he's worked with in the past. So what that's ended up resulting in is a lot of players that are from Argentina, from South America, that Messi played with in previous stops, obviously Busquets, Alba, Suarez, Rodrigo de Paul. There was clearly like an identification of the prioritizing guys that are going to fit in the locker room. Let's put it generously. And I do wonder if now that everyone's settled into the project for a couple years, both the players and also the front office that has now had a year to kind of get everything underneath them, if they're more willing to sort of go out and get the best players available. Lionel Messi, everyone has talked about for years how, he wants to play with his friends and he wants to be surrounded by people from Argentina and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, all of a sudden, some of his friends are moving on. And like he's now had 2.5 years to become friends with Ian Frey and Yannick Bright. And like, I know that may sound weird that they're friends, but like my point is he now has relationships with all the people that have been here. So it's not like you need to surround him with people he knows to get him comfortable. He's already comfortable with everyone here. So now you might feel more comfortable bringing in a player or two that doesn't necessarily fit that mold because everyone else is already comfortable and has sort of established a team culture. You're bringing outsiders into your culture instead of trying to establish a culture that you're comfortable with. And I think that opens up the pool of potential players enormously. And then you go back to, okay, you have the pull of Inter Miami. You have the pull of being a team that's going to compete for championships every season and wants to win it all the time. Like all of a sudden, Inter Miami becomes very attractive to all these other players that we probably wouldn't have considered as realistic options, maybe even before yesterday.
Yeah, I just think it's very healthy for a team to not build its culture in one mold and prioritize excellence over comfort.
Especially if that mold is going to be very difficult to
maintain. And I think this is a signing for the future. This is a signing that can really change into Miami's backline. And at least now, regardless of what form St. Clair plays with, this is an elite signing that should, on paper, have a huge impact on the goalkeeping situation, but also he's going to start. Every single game that is
Yeah.
a big game now, he will start. And there's not going to be a question mark about, oh, is it going to be Rocco? Should it be Ustari? All of that. Like, we're not going to find reasons to say this or the other is better. I think this is clearly meant to be the number one signing, and whoever comes in as the second, whether it's Ustari or whether it's somebody else that we bring in, I think they have to play second fiddle to St. Clair. And this is the player that we've invested in the goalkeeping position, at least for the foreseeable future. So I think it does two things. A, completely elevates the talent level in goalkeeping position and quells any uncertainty that's been surrounding this position. Really like how they're doing this business, because with the fullbacks, they already sorted that out. They've now sorted out the goalkeeping position. They can figure out who they want to keep as the number two, or bring in somebody new as a number two later in the window. This is no longer a priority position anymore because they've resolved it, and that for me is a really good way of handling the off season so far. And I really like how they're proceeding with their decision making.
Okay, I still have so many things to talk about with Dayne St. Clair, and we have so much else to talk about. So I'll just keep moving on. He played in a system that was low block, win on set pieces, win on the counter, and that's how we're going to win games in penalties by one goal, etc. And he's going to come into a system that, I don't know, that's kind of sounds similar to what Inter Miami played in the beginning of the season this year. They spent a lot of time going up one goal in the first half and then kind of bunkering in second halves. Like, I do feel like Javier Mascherano maybe is naturally inclined to that type of system, which is what made the goalkeeping situation last year so bizarre, because Ustari didn't fit that mold at all. This goalkeeper, I think, does fit that mold, but even if, and I think maybe we're right to assume that Inter Miami's not going to play that style with who they have, and now Javier Mascherano seems to have learned that that's not the best way to use this particular set of players. He will have to adjust. When you're constantly under pressure, you're constantly on alert, constantly making saves, you're very active as a goalkeeper. Whereas if you're playing for a team that's going to be dominant in possession, you're going to have long periods of time where you're kind of just have to be on your toes, ready for the balls over the top, ready to sweep up. You're going to be asked to make 3 saves, but you have to make them, as opposed to being asked to make 9 out of 10 saves. So, like, it is a different style of play for a goalkeeper, but there's nothing that tells me Dayne St. Clair can't adjust. It's just, it might be a little bit of adjustment.
And it's the responsibility of the coaching staff to make sure he understands what's required of him as well, right? It's the same as signing any other player. If you sign a central midfielder who's used to playing in a possession-heavy team, but now has to switch to counter-attacking, you have to switch his mind to putting in the ball early and making those through balls. Similarly with a goalkeeper as well. If you're playing possession-heavy football and this goalkeeper is not used to that, you have to get him used to it. You have to make him understand what his role on the team is going to be. And he has all the skill sets. It may not be elite skill sets all across the board. Yes, his shot stopping might be elite. His footwork needs some work, but that's what you work on at the training pitch. This is a 28-year-old goalkeeper, and for goalkeepers, that's a very young age. There's still time for him to actually evolve his game, and maybe that's one of the reasons he wants to come to Inter Miami, to try a different style of football as well, and not just play in that low block. So I don't see this as an issue at all. I think it's a little bit overhyped as well when you talk about he's not good with his feet, he's not good with long balls. Let's see what he is. There was a lot of data and statistics about Ustari. There was a lot of data and statistics about Rocco. Nobody expected Rocco to be what he is. Nobody. He was short, and everyone thought he was shaky on the ball, and then he won us the MLS Cup. So give him time. Let's see what he's made of, and then judge him as a player. But I think for what the package is overall, before we've purchased him, this is a very good signing. And now we just have to make sure he fits in well to what the team wants to do next season.
Okay. The other thing that we should talk about is, what is Dayne St. Clair wanting with his life and future, and why is he coming to Inter Miami from his perspective? Because I think that's interesting, and I don't necessarily think it's as set in stone as maybe some people initially thought or think. He's 29. He's about to turn 29 next summer. But for a goalkeeper, he's still pretty young. Like, he could still make the move to Europe. And I think
Easily.
a lot of people thought maybe he would go to Europe. Minnesota apparently offered him a $1 million salary. He rejected it. And then over the last few days, they offered him a slight increase on that. But as is being reported, once he found out Miami wanted him, he wanted to go to Miami. So that's a good feeling. He'd wanted to come to Inter Miami. He didn't want to stay in Minnesota. Great feeling. Here's the one thing I will just say. He is in line to be the Canadian #1 goalkeeper at the World Cup next year. And I'm sure that's way more important to him than being Inter Miami's goalkeeper or being Minnesota United's goalkeeper or whatever. And so, not that he wouldn't do that in Minnesota versus Inter Miami, but he might not do it if he goes to a club in Europe and takes him 6 months to win the starting job. Because while he's currently the #1, it's not like there is competition for the role. If he's not playing, he won't get that spot. And so I am just curious if there's a world where Inter Miami said to him, we are ultra focused on this CONCACAF Champions Cup, and you are ultra focused on being the #1 at the World Cup for Canada. Let's get a marriage together for these next 6 months. And then if you decide you still want to go to Europe, maybe that's something we can facilitate in the summer. Maybe that's something we can facilitate next winter or whatever. So on the one hand, I think there's a world where this is like a short-term marriage. I also think this could be the goalkeeper for the rest of the Lionel Messi era at Inter Miami. So, but I do want to make sure I make that clear. I think you can kind of talk yourself into how this makes sense for both sides to be a short-term thing, especially as we'll talk about later, roster building from now until the summer, how like some of those pieces could fit together. So we'll see. He'll get when he arrives in South Florida in January and he comes up to team training for the first time for the preseason. Like, he'll talk with the media and we'll get some quotes with him and we'll learn more. But for right now, like I do think there's at least a chance this is short term. But also, going back to how we started this podcast, Jorge Mas and the team are focused on this CONCACAF Champions Cup. And like, if they're just going out and maxing out what this roster can be for the next 6 months to try and win that, like, I'm fine with that too. I think that's cool too. And then on the other end, he could just be our guy for the next 7 years, which could be pretty cool too.
I don't see a reason to fault that approach. If that's the case, then sure. I think we're going to have that exact same conversation, maybe about a few other players that Inter Miami brings in, because this being a World Cup year is very interesting on how players are making certain decisions about their futures. So not a conversation that's the last time we will have. I do think there's a good point that you make here, but I feel he's going to be a player for the future and not just the short term, because I hope that's the case and not the short term. But hey, we'll see how it goes.
Either way, though, I think that this is fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think it's a 2 or 3 year like a 2-year contract with an option, and so you're getting, even if he stays throughout the contract, you're getting his best years.
And 30 is like prime for a goalkeeper as well.
And you're paying, like, really, you're using a lot of money on a goalkeeper, but you're getting like one of the best this year he was the best goalkeeper in the league. So
yeah,
like I think that's still good value, even though it's a lot of money. It's like still good value. So I love this signing. I really do. Okay, let's talk about Luis Suárez, because a lot of the same themes we'll probably hit on here. Luis Suárez has officially re-signed with Inter Miami for another season. I will note, Michelle Kaufman wrote he's signed for one final season, and I asked her about why she said one final season as opposed to one more season, and she did not respond. So take that for what it's worth. She said one final season. He has officially re-signed for the 2026 season. I think Inter Miami fans are pretty conflicted about this. What do you think?
I think there's a large majority who don't want him here. No, I don't think there's any confliction. I think Inter Miami fans are not particularly happy with that. I don't know. The chat will guide us with this, but I don't think the general mood about this is positive across the Inter Miami fan base.
I think that I just, we've talked about this a number of times. When you think about Luis Suárez, it was 4 games without him. And it was amazing. I'm not, no, no, like I'm not.
Four
gonna-
best games of
no,
Inter Miami's.
I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't
History.
awesome. I'm not going to pretend like we didn't see something we had not seen before. And I'm not going to pretend like you couldn't look at that and then kind of project it into the future and think, man, this could be really, really fun. I'm not going to pretend like any of that didn't happen. It did. But it was 4 games. So
Can I just? Yes, but that 4 games were enough to tell me one thing, and this is my personal opinion. You can feel free to disagree.
ahead.
Luis Suarez cannot start for Inter Miami again next season if we want to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. As simple as that. We're not winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup with Luis Suarez in the starting 11. As simple as that.
I don't think I disagree.
I
That's fine. No, you're more than welcome to have your
yeah.
opinion, and I
No,
think that's
absolutely.
something a lot of people will share. I think Inter Miami is still going to view Luis Suarez as a guy that's more than capable of starting and producing and being a key part of this team. I will remind you all, like if you go look at the 4 games before Suarez left the lineup, or not the last 4 wins, they scored the same number of goals as they did in the 4-game playoffs. And I get level of competition, all that stuff. I'm just saying, like they were improving in form with Suarez, and then they took another step without him. And I don't even want to relitigate this. He's back. He is back. So the question is not should
Whether
he
or
come back
not.
or not.
Yeah.
What did you want? I think we both got to a point where we're like, I think we're ready if he moves on, but that's not what's happening. So I'm ready to put that conversation to bed.
I would love to understand the decision making behind this because I genuinely think this was the opportunity for Inter Miami to say, okay, we're moving on and we're going to build something different this time. I think by bringing back Luis Suarez, you're reverting to something of the old.
They don't think Luis Suarez is terrible like a lot of people do. They think he's a good quality striker, and I tend to agree with them actually.
It's gone from elite to good quality.
No, it has. It has. I agree with you. It was elite in 2024. It was
And
good
if you
in
want to win the
2025.
CONCACAF Champions Cup, you need an elite striker, right? How else would you go into that game against Nashville with Luis Suarez as your starting striker and be okay with that? Especially not having Busquets anymore or Alba.
Yeah. They just scored 9 goals on. Or they scored 8 goals on Nashville.
Yeah, but you had
in the
Jordi
last 2
Alba
games.
and Luis Suarez. Sorry, and Sergio Busquets.
I get it, but my point is, like, I don't think Luis Suarez had 34 goal contributions, and I don't think Inter Miami thinks he's going to sink them in any way, especially against Nashville. I will. No. So let me just stop. Inter Miami can absolutely beat Nashville with Luis Suarez in the lineup. If you want to make a claim that they can't go down to Mexico and beat Club
Okay.
America, fine.
Yes.
I will entertain that. The idea
Okay.
that they can't beat any MLS team with Luis Suarez in the lineup is kind of absurd because they still have Lionel Messi and they're still going to have Matteo Silvetti and they're still going to have the best goalkeeper in the MLS behind all of them.
So what does this mean for the season then? Right? Because for me, the question is not about whether you should be here or not. That's done and dusted. He is here. He's staying for another season. For me, the question is how does this affect the roster building? What's going to happen in that number 9 spot? Are we going to sign a DP in that position? Are we going to focus the rest of our off-season building on other areas of the park? Because we're not getting Allende back at this rate either. Celta Vigo is holding out for that as well. So if your intent is to bring back someone like Allende, you not just lost Allende's goals, you've lost that pace and everything as well. So you're going to have to replace him. So that's the kind of mindset that I have. What does this imply for the rest of the squad building?
Yeah, I think Suarez is going to be the starting striker to start the season. That's what I think.
Jeez.
And I think people that are assuming he's going to have a bench role or some sort of limited role are being overly optimistic. And I do want to have a conversation about what it would take for him to not be the starting striker in a minute. Because I think this is maybe what kind of makes everything make sense, in my head at least. But just connecting some dots here, I think Inter Miami thinks Luis Suárez is good enough to be a starter and compete for anything. I think that the only way Luis Suárez is not going to be the starting striker is if they go out and sign a big name DP. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, completely agree with that.
If they go sign another Tadeo Allende type player, which, by the way, there are plenty of Tadeo Allende type players out there. I don't think he's going to start over Luis Suárez.
No, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to start over. And depends on the kind of player that they bring in, but I'm not sure that it's going to be someone. I don't think it's going to be someone of the same quality. So I agree. Not good. Not over Luis Suárez.
And so I think they're going to start with Luis Suárez and they're going to save that spot. Now, here, let's just go to this. This is my big thought. Inter Miami right now has 2 DPs under contract for next season. They've got Lionel Messi, number 1, Rodrigo de Paul, number 2. So I ask you, for that third DP, do you want it to be a player that is above Rodrigo de Paul in terms of name recognition, value, price, salary? Or do you want it to be a player below Rodrigo de Paul?
Above Rodrigo de Paul, for sure.
So here's what I'm thinking. I don't think there is a player available that will be more valuable than Rodrigo de Paul
in this window
to be had in January.
Yeah.
I think all of the players in the world. Now listen, maybe they dig someone up. Maybe some player has out with their team in the next 3 weeks. Like, who knows? But I think all the players in the world that are better than Rodrigo de Paul, more valuable than Rodrigo de Paul, especially at the striker position, are in Europe, competing with teams that are not going to sell their their starting striker in the middle of the season. And so if you want them to go get a star striker that is going to be a higher sort of quality of player than Rodrigo de Paul, you're going to have to wait till the summer. You just are. And if you look at it as Inter Miami and say, man, we'll try in January, we'll see if something turns up, but we don't like Timo Werner, like maybe Mo Salah is like someone we want to consider in the summer. Maybe it's, who knows, will be available next summer. Maybe it could be Heung-min Son, the next Heung-min Son. But the point is, like, we don't think that player is going to be available until the summer. I don't want to go get a player in Argentina that's the striker for Argentinos Juniors, use my DP spot on that player, and risk missing out on like an actual superstar. And if all that means is that Luis Suárez, one of the greatest strikers of his generation, a guy who's second in goal contributions in the MLS over the last 2 seasons, is my starting striker for the next 5 months, I can live with that. Like, I think that's the plan.
I think that's a good plan. That's a very solid plan. That's a good team building idea because you want to maximize your buckets as much as possible. And I think what you're saying is Luis Suárez is a stopgap until we actually bring in the next big striker for Inter Miami. And I think you're absolutely right to point out that the next big striker for Inter Miami is going to be available in January, in the summer, not in January, which is a fair assumption to make. My only point that counters this is this completely contradicts Inter Miami's idea of winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Because I don't know.
Hold on. Let me just say something. They just benched him for the biggest game of the year. If they feel like in the semifinal and final for those 3 games they're better with him on the bench, that's different than saying they need to go sign a number 9 DP right now.
No, but I also think if you do want to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, it's going to be much harder. The quality that you have available this season has already gone down because you've lost Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets. Can you afford to gamble on this? That's my only question. The answer might be yes, you can afford to gamble on Luis Suárez, and I'd be more than happy to hear those arguments. The answer might be that no, you can't gamble on Luis Suárez because you also have to bolster other positions. So by bringing him back, I think you have to sort of cover up for his weaknesses. And that means for the next 6 months at least, a lot of signings that you bring in will have to have some sort of, will need to be made in the way that covers up for some of Luis Suarez's weaknesses. And it just kind of handicaps you. But I think the approach that you've laid out here, that have him available for the first 6 months, let him be the starting striker for the MLS, but also in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Maybe bring in a young backup striker who can play more minutes than Alan Abondo, so that the pressure on Luis Suarez is not continuously as much. And if that youth player can actually hit his stride, that could be something that you could leverage in the MLS games, and then use Luis Suarez exclusively for CONCACAF Champions Cup. So have him as your stopgap solution, and then go for a bigger striker in the summer. I think that's the right approach. I think it's a good approach, but I'm not sure if my only concern is, let's just put it this way, my only concern is that it will compromise your goal of winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I may be right, I may be wrong on that, but I think it just adds a level of risk to it. And I'm not sure, because we can't deny, Scotty, that the difference in play style between with and without Suarez was astronomical. Inter Miami was playing some sublime
For 4 games.
soccer
For 4 games.
but that 4 game cycle is a valid cycle. We've never
Okay.
played like that
I'm
with
not-
Luis Suarez. It won us the MLS Cup.
I'm not denying
So
that.
you can't say that it's just 4 games, because those were the 4 most important games of Inter Miami. Imagine if we were playing like that for the entire season. It would be
No, but
relentless.
stop. Hold on. I guess my point of saying it's 4 games is that if you feel like you need that, you need to bench Suarez in the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal in order to advance, you can do that for 3 games in the semifinal and final. Like,
But you will not.
it's still on the table. Like, you can have Suarez be your starting striker and then decide in a huge game, I can't have Suarez. I need to put Messi as a false 9 and let's get guys running around him and go back to that style. Like, having Suarez as your sort of starting number 9 going into the season doesn't mean you can't make a tactical switch in a huge game. You know, like,
I don't necessarily agree with that wholeheartedly, because I think there's an element of, okay, we've now signed Luis Suarez. The kind of forwards that we're going to sign are going to be different from if you had, because now you have to play a certain way. If Luis Suarez, do you agree with this proposition that you have to play a certain way if Luis Suarez is your starting striker, right?
on that specific day.
Yes. So if he, okay, you've signed him as your striker, you're assuming that going into the CONCACAF Champions Cup, he is going to be your starting striker, right? At least in the first few games, because that's the bet that you made.
Yes.
So now that you have him as the starting striker, you now need to build the squad around how Luis Suarez would be in the starting 11. I think Inter Miami is missing up on the opportunity of going the way we want to play is going to be expansive, fast, transition-based football where we can hit teams on the counter. I don't think we can.
I understand what you're saying.
Do you get the point that I'm trying to make?
I totally understand what you're saying. Here's
I don't think I can verbalize myself correctly at the moment, but I think you've passed up on the opportunity to play in that expansive manner by re-signing Luis Suarez right now. And you don't have Allende, you don't have Sergio Busquets, and you don't have Jordi Alba. So you saying or suggesting that we can go back by just benching Luis Suarez, I don't think we can go back by benching Luis Suarez that easily anymore, because you're giving up on the opportunity of signing players who are made of the ilk that you would play without Luis Suarez, you know?
So let me just sort of try and go to where you were going, because maybe that'll set the context. What we were going to do for this episode was talk about Luis Suarez and then talk about what we wanted Inter Miami to look like in 2026. And obviously the Dayne St. Clair thing happened yesterday, and so we're not going to have a full conversation on that. But if you and I sort of took our pieces onto the puzzle board and we started to build a plan of what we would want Inter Miami to look like next year, and moving forward, it would look a lot like what we saw in the playoff run without Luis Suarez in the starting lineup. Totally agree with that, 100%. I agree. You've sold me. You don't have to sell me anymore. I think it's better if we don't have a striker that is physically limited and sort of stalls your offense in specific ways that don't allow you to play as dynamically as you would want to, and going two ways in that mold. Yes, agreed. I'm also thinking about the reality of reshaping a roster in that direction. It happens not one player, like it happens one player at a time. And so I don't think Inter Miami is going to build a team and sign guys for the next 3 years in order to fit a style of soccer that has Luis Suárez in it. I think if they have the same mind that we do about moving to that more expansive, aggressive,
Dynamic football,
athletic,
yeah.
dynamic style that we saw in the playoffs, if that's their long-term goal, I still think you sign those types of players this winter. And then you get them to fold in around Messi and Luis Suarez for 5 months next year. But it doesn't delay the transition other than you're not actually playing that style. But in terms of the roster building, you're not delaying building the roster in that direction.
And that's my question, right? Does it delay it? I think you're right. It probably doesn't. But there's a risk that you're compromising that approach by bringing back Luis Suarez, and it might work completely in your favor. That's understandable, and they may end up signing players that do add that aggressive, dynamic style of football that we really enjoyed watching, even with Luis Suarez on the pitch. So I'll be interested to see how it works. I'm just saying there's a risk associated with it, and I hope Inter Miami has weighed up their options.
And again, listen, like, I think if there was going to be a super, like if Heung-min Son was available to Inter Miami this winter,
and they would have gone for it.
It's different, right? Like, and maybe that player will sort of present themselves over the next 5 weeks before the European January transfer market closes, and then we're having a totally different conversation.
I heard
But
Kylian Mbappe is not happy at Real Madrid.
Yeah, exactly. Generally, those players don't come available until the summer because they play in Europe and they're not going to be leaving in the middle of the season. One thing I will say is LAFC did something like this last year where they had a DP spot available and they brought in Cengiz Ünder on loan to fill that DP spot until the summer. Then they decided we can do better. And then they brought in Heung-min Son in the summer with that same DP spot. So maybe that's something Inter Miami tries. Is there a guy out there in Europe that's not getting the minutes he wants to right now, and it's not the best time to get a move, so maybe he has to wait for the summer to get a permanent move, but he wants to get some playing time, maybe to get himself into form for the World Cup. And normally he would go from like a high-level Spanish club to a lower level, like a lower half of the table Spanish club, but Inter Miami can convince him to come to the MLS instead.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's out there like a guy who would fill that DP spot for 6 months. I'm not suggesting it's not. They would have to get creative, and they have gotten very creative. So maybe there is a star player, and it maybe isn't even a striker. But I guess I'm trying to think about this through Inter Miami's eyes. I think they're going to be content to have Luis Suarez as their sort of default number 9 with Javier Mascherano on the back of his head, knowing I did like Messi as a false 9. We can go to that if we have to. But on a game-to-game basis, especially in the MLS, like I think Luis Suarez is going to be your number 9 until the summer, where especially if Suarez is not bouncing back into what he was in 2024, you can then have realistic options to go get a huge DP number 9. That's what I think is happening.
I agree with you. I'm just voicing some of my concerns and frustrations. And honestly, I just don't want to watch Luis Suarez struggle for 6 months. So if he comes in, I hope he comes in just banging goals game after game. And I'll be very happy if that's the case.
Kareem, thank you for the super chat. He says 3 realistic players that you would buy. And then he mentioned Virgil van Dijk earlier. I'm saying save the DP spot until the summer because if nothing great opens up this winter, save it to the summer. But we don't necessarily have to use it on number 9 either. There's been some Robert Lewandowski. I don't think that's real.
Well, that would be good if that happens. But yeah.
Paulo Dybala is an Argentine striker that you would imagine would be a free agent. Like, I'm not saying that's... I don't know. I'll be honest. I just looked at Argentine strikers that have played for the national team in the last 5 years, and his name popped up. But my point is, like,
where's Dybala playing now? Is he playing in Saudi? Oh, yeah. Still at Roma. Okay.
There are plenty of guys that are going to be better than anything you're going to get from
Griezmann, Verratti,
Argentina.
Koke, Otamendi's some names, but there's some good names in there. Van Dijk. Honestly, Van Dijk's in our defense. We're not conceding anything. So, sure, bring him in.
Well, if you want a
But it's not
ball-playing
realistic.
goalkeeper that solves your size in the box issue, I think he's going to be a good option. No, I
You
mean,
mean ball
listen.
playing centre back?
Yeah, sorry.
I was like, Van Dijk's not a goalkeeper.
Yeah, ball-playing center back that solves your physicality and size in the box. I think he'd be a great choice. No, listen, like, I don't know if we're the right people because I think a lot of their signings coming up are going to be those $1 to $2 million signings at center back,
Scouted, yeah.
defensive midfielder, an Allende replacement if it's not Allende. So as far as names, I think it's tough for us without
Yeah.
really looking forward.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Justin said Tadeo Allende is not coming back. Celta want $6 million for him. I just want to say with regards to Allende, the window hasn't opened for Celta Vigo. They bought him for $2 million. That price will come down dramatically if he goes back there and they decide they still don't want him and we start getting to the 25th of January and we get to the last week of their window closing. It is very easy to be brash and optimistic about how much money you're going to make when you're still 6 weeks away from the closing of the window. That number will drop. And I will go back to what I keep saying about Allende. He will have options to make more money elsewhere. If he goes to Celta Vigo and he says, I'm only going to Inter Miami, I think that deal will happen. I think that price is going to drop from 6 down to 2, maybe 2.5. And Allende is going to get sort of $1 million a year. And you're talking about sort of a high-level TAM player. If that's what Tadeo Allende wants, I think Inter Miami can make it happen. So I wouldn't worry about Celta Vigo because they lose all their bargaining power when Allende comes to them and says, you're either going to pay me and I can just sit here or you can send me to Inter Miami. So it's all bluster, or it's really early for Celta Vigo. And so if you want Allende back, I think it's more about being patient. And also, like, Inter Miami is going to be looking for other options in the meantime because they might never like what
Celta Vigo wants.
Like, they might not want to wait till the end of January, or they might not want to wait for Allende. Allende might decide, you know what, $2.5 million salary at River Plate sounds pretty good. I'll take that. So I think it's just a patience and a waiting game on Allende. The other thing I wanted to mention with regards to incomings and outgoings is Talasco Segovia. This is a big move with Dayne St. Clair. Like, he is going to take a lot of money. And I wonder if that means they think they're going to have a big incoming amount of allocation money. And that would happen, I think, from exits. And the two players I think that make the most sense are Talasco Segovia and David Ruiz. So if they think they're going to sell David Ruiz for $2 million and they're going to be able to convert all of that into allocation money, or if they're going to sell Talasco Segovia to Europe for $12 million and convert that to allocation money, like they did with Diego Gomez last year, like, I think watching for their next couple moves could be telling if they think they're going to get a big influx of allocation money. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I think Oscar Starry has to be gone. Like, I think they're going to buy him out.
No, that was always the case. It had to be the case because you're paying so much to your starting goalkeeper now. You can't be paying almost the same amount to your backup goalkeeper either, right? So I think that was always the case. That was always the understanding. I won't be surprised if they bring in Rocco as the number 2 if he's willing to be as a number 2 at the club.
I don't think so. Because if you're... Okay, first of all, for Ustadi, we're going to get into this in a minute. Inter Miami is not going to want to have as many international players as they had last year. We're going to talk about that with the Super Draft. So I think they're going to want to get more American or, players that have their green cards. And so I don't think it makes sense to have a backup goalkeeper that is taking up international rosters a lot. So I think they're going to move on Ustari. And I think spending this much money on Dayne St. Clair means they can't have a backup with a high salary either. So
absolutely
Ustari, I think, is definitely going to get bought out. And then as far as Rocco, like, I don't Dayne St. Clair's the guy. Period. He's your guy.
Has to
now.
be.
And if you're Rocco, you deserve a chance to go start somewhere.
You do.
So for Rocco, like I don't think there's any reason for him to come back. And I think it's not a surprise. We heard Wednesday that Inter Miami and Lanús are no longer negotiating for Rocco, and then 12 hours later,
You
we
sign
find
a
out
goalkeeper. Yeah.
that Dayne St. Clair's coming to Inter Miami. So I think all of that kind of wraps it up. Okay, Saur, anywhere else in the roster that you want to talk about or discuss before we get to the super draft picks?
No, I think it's been a long conversation, and honestly, this could have been like 2 different episodes by itself.
Sure.
So I think we've done a good job in condensing that, but it's time to talk about the youth. And Inter Miami's signed a fair few players this time, or brought in a few draft players.
Drafted. Yeah.
Yeah, drafted.
Last
There
thing
you
I
go.
will mention for the rest of the roster, I still think center back or two, a midfielder or two,
Yeah.
and then at least a winger, if not Allende, to replace Allende. Like they still got a lot of work to do, but left back, right back, I think you're set. Goalkeeper, I think you're set in terms of the guys that are actually going to play. So
I would say one
they're making
midfielder,
progress.
2 forwards. No? That's the way I would look at it. And centre back, obviously. 1 centre back, 1 central midfielder, 2 forwards.
I think
It's probably the right.
I think we got like 5 or 6 at least through the
More.
spine
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
So if you want to add a second one to one of those spots, I think that's fine and probably accurate. Okay, let's get to the super draft because it was today. And Inter Miami took players, unlike last year. Last season, they traded the number 3 overall pick for allocation money because they had a really high pick because they were really bad in the league in 2023. This year, they were really good. In 2024, they were really good. So they had a really high draft pick. In fact, they had 30th pick overall. And, that wasn't worth a lot of allocation money, as we found out today, because they decided to take a player from Bryant University, a right-footed center back named Del Talabi. First, I want to say, before the draft started, I was reading a lot of people, listening to a lot of people that are college soccer and super draft type experts. And they said the things they were hearing from Inter Miami is they wanted to get more American. That was one of the 2 sort of things that stood out. 1, they wanted to get more American. And 2, they wanted to get players that had some comfortability in Spanish. And those were the 2 things they were looking for. For those that don't know, Inter Miami's supplemental roster, which is spots 21 through 30, has actually gotten very thin lately. Noah Allen, Yannick Bright, David Ruiz, and Ian Frey were all on that last year.
Yep.
They now got new contracts. They're moving on to the senior team roster. Ryan Saylor, who was on there, is now with Seattle. We should mention, by the way, he just signed a contract yesterday with the Seattle Sounders. So good for him.
Congrats to him.
It's a 1-year contract with a 1-year option. I wasn't 100% sure he was going to wind up in the
Stay
MLS,
in the league.
so
Yeah.
congratulations to him. So anyways, Inter Miami's supplemental roster, I believe right now only has Tyler Hall, Israel Boatwright, and Santi Morales, which means they have 7 spots available. And we've talked about this in the past. We don't necessarily think they've done a great job with this incoming class of academy kids, and they haven't signed any of them as a result. So I don't know if they're going to sign anybody because I don't think there's any kid that seems like he's ready to make the jump to the first team. So they can fill it out with super draft picks and sort of low-priced veterans. But one of the things they really wanted to do was make sure that those guys were sort of American, so they didn't have to use an international roster slot. And that was the focus of today. They drafted the 30th overall pick, the 32nd overall pick, and then 2 late second-round picks and a late third-round pick. I just want to focus on the first 2 because I think those are the most interesting. Del Talabi, Bryant University. He's a right-footed center back. He's 24 years old. He's incredibly old for a center back, college-age center back. He did like a 5th year of high school, sort of. Very American thing. If you're not American, you wouldn't understand.
No understanding of what that is.
He went to like a postgraduate high school. It's
Interesting.
It's its own thing. And then he stayed in college for 5 years and was a graduate student with a red shirt and all that stuff. So He's 24 years old, which is, taking it back to the soccer world, pretty old for a rookie. But you would imagine physically he's a finished product in terms of his development. He's probably as ready as he's going to be. He was a Herman Trophy watch list type player. So, and for those that don't know, that's the best player in college soccer. Didn't win the award, but he was sort of one of the guys that was in the running at the end. And then he was sort of one of the key players for a Bryant University team that was one of the best teams in the country. I think they were ranked 11th in the Final Bowl, and they made it to the quarterfinals of the national championship. So he is on a team that's a winner, a winning team. He's a right-footed center back, 6'2", and one of the things I heard is that Bryant University has a lot of Spanish flavor throughout their roster, so he's probably pretty comfortable with, if not outright speaking Spanish, the vocabulary needed to communicate on the pitch.
It's very interesting because 24 is hell of a age to be coming in and as a draftee. And I don't know what the intention behind this would be. And you make a very good point about the supplemental roster. And I'm hoping that Inter Miami is actually intending to build that up even more. And bringing in a 24-year-old, you could get a Yannick Bright level player who could actually have an impact in this team this season, or somebody who's just coming in to add bodies to the roster. It'll be interesting to see how he gets treated. I'll be honest, I haven't seen him play, so a lot of my understanding of this player is from you, and I don't think you've seen him play either. But
definitely not.
Yeah, so can't comment right now. But congrats to him, man.
I went to watch highlights of him, and it took me several minutes of going through his highlights to figure out if he was left-footed or right-footed, because the highlights are just him like in the box, like heading balls away, and like, so he is right-footed, by the way.
At least he's tall. That's good.
He's 6'2", and I think if everything goes well, he'll be Ryan Saylor's replacement.
Yeah.
A bigger body that maybe will play 75 minutes. Maybe he'll play 500 minutes if you have an injury crisis. And that's like if things go well. And if things don't go well, he might be a guy that plays on the B team for a year. But
yeah. And you could unearth a gem as well, man. Like, there are Yannick Bright cases in the world, as shown by Yannick Bright. So I don't want to hype that up and say, oh, he's going to be another one of those. No, absolutely not. But I think if he can get more than 100 minutes in this team, even 100 minutes in this team, I think is solid. It will be a good return value.
Yeah, so watch for him in the preseason. He was their first pick, and I think maybe probably the most likely to make the roster because, A, if you told me we need a fifth center back and there's like a spot for a guy, like that feels like something he could really there's room for him to step into that.
Was this a round one pick? No, right? 30th would be, was it a round one pick?
First round.
Last pick of the first round. That means you get your bingo on this, or like you get a bingo cross. Oh, I was so close to dudding you on this one, but fair.
I know my team. What can I say? And then the second player I want to talk about is Kenan Hart. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. They call him Kenny.
Kenan Hart, yeah.
They call
Kenny
him
Hart.
Kenny. Yeah.
That's a name and a half. That's a better name than Baltazar. Can you just say Hot 75 on the back of your jersey? And that's like, okay.
Yeah. Maybe it was like Hot number 8 or something. He's a box-to-box midfielder from Duke, 21, I think. So he's much more of like younger. Guy. They picked him 32nd, so 2 picks after. You're talking about the same sort of level of investment. And apparently he's a very active box-to-box, runs around a lot. And again, if you're talking about Inter Miami wanting a 7th midfielder on the roster for training and to get 100
minutes.
Maybe
do a job. Yeah.
Think Lawson Sunderland. Like maybe this guy is someone who can end up there. And if not, like maybe he'll just do what Bailey Sparks did this year, which was play on the B team. But if he's from Duke, you'd imagine he's a pretty smart guy. So those are the 2 that I think could actually make the first team.
Yeah.
And then the other 3, they took a forward also from Bryant University, Mamadi Gianni, a defender named Alex Barger from Indiana, and a forward from Vermont, which I think was the number 1 team in the country, named Maximilian Kissel, as their 2 late second-round picks and the last pick in the draft. Those 3, I think, will either not sign with Inter Miami or will be signing with the B team and participate with the B team. So
that's fair. I think the midfielder is a good one, especially if it's an athletic midfielder. There's always utility to having someone like that on the team. I know David Ruiz is not the comparison here by any means. David Ruiz is very technical in comparison, but still, I think having that athleticism is good, even if it's for training purposes. So interesting to see if any of those 2 can actually rise up the ranks and have some minutes this season. But this is always a fun time. Congratulations to all of these players. I'm sure they're really excited by what has transpired over the last day and 2. So congratulations, and I hope you have long futures either into Miami or somewhere else.
yes, and that I think is maybe one of the coolest things is maybe these kids are going to sign in the USL or something, but I think they're going to come to training and meet Messi first, and so that's pretty cool. But
That's huge.
I think the two to pay attention to are Talabi, Del Talabi, and Kenny Hott.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than you want to see him make the team so you can get a jersey from him.
I can already imagine so many good awards for Kenny Hott, but oh well.
Okay, that's all I got, man. This is.
That was a lot. You gave me a lot this episode, so thank you.
Are you surprised by how fast they're operating?
No, I'm not. I'm just surprised by what positions they're looking at immediately. Like, it almost feels like they're starting from the back and they're going towards the front. So it's very interesting. And they seem to be locking down those positions that you could leave to the end, but then if you do leave to the end, they could become problematic. So they've just sorted them out right now. And they're like, we're going to do with these now, and then we're going to focus on the big signings that are going to come in the forward line and the midfield. So it's an interesting approach. They're making some good moves, unexpected moves, and that's what you get with Inter Miami, I guess.
Last year, they kicked it off on January 1st, and that's been typical. I think the only time in the last couple of years they've signed a player in December was Luis Suárez, and we kind of knew he was going to sign for like 6 months ahead of time, and they wanted to get that out so they could sell jerseys. They generally do all their business in January, especially incomings. So for them to be here middle of December already having signed Facundo Mura, already having signed Sergio Reguilon, already having agreed
I
with
forgot
Dayne
about
St.
those 2, yeah.
and also re-signing both Ian Frey and Luis Suárez. And also, I know this was negotiated in the summer, but getting the Rodrigo de Paul deal over the line. Like, they are incredibly active and, dare I say, competent. We'll have to wait for the results on the field to see to judge them. But
at least they make moves.
And I think they're plan A moves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's also interesting because with Inter Miami, you get rumors, but then they do it comes out of the blue. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it just comes out of the blue that nobody's expecting. And I don't think anyone in their right mind would have predicted us signing St. Clair. Like, nobody would have. And if you bet your money on it ahead of time, then congratulations, you would have made a lot of money because this was an out of the blue signing. And that's the thing I like about Inter Miami signings as well. They just come immediately from nowhere, and it's fun. Otherwise, with the European transfers, the rumors are swirling before it gets announced, like 5 months before it gets announced. So hopefully more of these, man. We wake up and it's a trove of signings coming in.
Okay. Saur, you and I, over the last week and a half, have recorded more podcasts than I would like to admit because we are going on a little bit of a planned hiatus for the next 2 weeks. We've got episodes pre-recorded about the schedule, about Javier Mascherano, some fun stuff, some lighthearted stuff, some very crushingly critical, poignant observations wrapped in some Christmas presents that we'll sort of release over the next 2 weeks. But unless there's some huge signing and we have to go live, this will be our last time, man, in 2025. Do you have any final words for the year?
No, I don't know if you guys will see us live unless there's a signing or two. And if you don't, then I wish everyone a fantastic holiday season. I hope you have a lovely start to the new year. And I hope Inter Miami keeps all of us on our toes, because that's exactly how we like it in the off season, where we think there's not going to be much to talk about, but we keep churning out episodes like it's candy. It's been phenomenal. It's been a great year. This was the year that we hit 1,000 subscribers, so I will always remember it as that, where Drive Pink Dialogue made a few strides. I've truly enjoyed doing this with you, Scotty. See, I can't even get my words out anymore. I truly enjoy doing this with you, Scotty. It's been so much fun, and I wish you a fantastic holiday season. I wish our viewers and audience a fantastic holiday season, and we will see you guys very, very soon. If not in the new year, then maybe tomorrow with another episode of signings. But yeah,
Just gonna say we're gonna be back on your screen multiple times over the next week.
Yeah.
But
me with more hair as well. So watch out for that.
okay, guys, have a lovely night, and we will see you guys next time. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.